Hi, folks. Joseph Kursky here with you to talk about types of knowledge and GIS instruction with Geographic Information Systems technology and spatial thinking. Dr. Peter Arthur, senior instructor from the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, describes metacognitive knowledge as anything one knows about thinking, especially one's own. Dr. Arthur further breaks this down into three types of knowledge: declarative knowledge, knowledge about oneself as a learner and what can influence one's performance; procedural knowledge, skills, heuristics, and strategies, knowledge about how to do things; and finally, conditional knowledge, knowledge about when and in what conditions certain knowledge is useful. Dr. Arthur goes further by defining metacognitive regulation, the process of managing one's own learning, including planning, monitoring, and evaluating. I believe it is helpful to keep this knowledge framework at the forefront of when we teach with GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, because, first of all, it is often difficult to assess and quantify what students are gaining when they use GIS. Yes, I and my colleagues who teach with GIS, including you watching this most assuredly, do so because you, truly believe that and have witnessed at all levels and in all disciplines, from primary to university level and beyond, in science, social studies, language arts, math, geography, etc., that students are gaining critical skills and key skills in critical thinking, problem solving, and spatial temporal thinking. They gain skills in communication and working with data. They gain content knowledge about earthquakes, population change, water, biomes, health, etc., demography. They apply the geographic perspective to solve problems. Helping students be purposeful about their declarative knowledge about how they learn can help them move forward as they gain these skills. Secondly, procedural knowledge can help faculty structure lessons, courses, and programs to be as effective as possible when they teach with GIS. GIS is a system and thus is inherently complex. It is also complex because it deals with the real world, our complex dynamic planet, at multiple scales. Our world is dynamic. It's a system of systems: the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, the anthrosphere, the human sphere, and so on. It's also a set of cycles: the hydrologic cycle, the carbon cycle, etc. So the world is a complex, dynamic place, shaped in part by 7.5 billion people modifying the surface, but also natural forces like volcanism and tectonic action. Procedural knowledge helps us thoughtfully consider how to teach in this dynamic environment with GIS. The Earth is changing, GIS is changing, instruction changes, our educational institutions evolve, societal needs change, etc. So in this system of change, procedural knowledge, these sets of skills, heuristics, and strategies, knowledge about how to do things, keeping that in mind helps us consider how to thoughtfully teach with GIS going forward. Conditional knowledge about when and in what conditions certain knowledge is useful also helps us to teach effectively. For example, if and when do students need to know about map projections? Do you put that in your first part of your course? When I'm working with business students, do I start with map projections? No, but I do say at some point you're going to be mapping trade routes in the Arctic and you're going to be routing ships, etc. I want them to know about map projections at that point. I want them to know that it matters what map projection you choose, especially in polar regions, and why that matters, because it affects all their measurements. So there are certain points and in certain instances where you either back off or you put certain pieces of geographic technology at the forefront. When do they need to know about field data collection, about symbology and classification, about spatial analysis, about communicating with dashboards and infographics? Being sensitive to the level that students have behind them: primary, secondary, community, technical, tribal, college, university, informal education, and what context you're teaching this. Is it in a data science program? Is it in geography? Is it in GI science? Is it in health? Is it in engineering, business, etc.? What context are you teaching geographic technologies? That will help as well as you thoughtfully consider how to move this forward. Why do I keep saying moving this forward? Because I don't want people to think about, I've taught GIS this way for X number of years, and that's the way I'm going to teach it going forward. GIS is changing. The earth is changing. So students' needs are changing. How do we embrace the modern notion of GIS as a platform and teach in a dynamic, engaging way going forward? And finally, metacognitive regulation is also helpful as faculty consider their own learning in GIS. Faculty are learning along with their students. And how can they evaluate their own learning? What do faculty need to know in order to be able to teach effectively in this area? And how can they evaluate their students? Is it through portfolios, story maps, infographics, traditional kinds of reports, videos, discussion forums online or face-to-face? Lots of ways to assess student knowledge, but I contend that many of those ways are things that they'll actually do in the workplace. But they're not the same as what much of the assessment is still in education, and that is answers on standardized tests. These kinds of assessment tools are needed, they're relevant, but they need to be thoughtfully considered as we move forward in GIS and geotechnologies and spatial thinking. So that's a bit of a reflection on Peter Arthur's four types, metacognitive knowledge, and then breaking that down into three types of knowledge: declarative, procedural, and conditional knowledge. Thanks, and I encourage you to think carefully and thoughtfully as you move forward with your GIS instruction. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks.